My name is Pam Mary. I am the president of the board of directors for the RP Group, and it is my pleasure to welcome all of you here this afternoon for this session featuring the 2023 Outstanding Project of the Year Award, and to welcome our presenters. There are 4 presenters here today from Irvine Valley College, and they're going to be talking about their project Crossing the Finish Line on the power of information and monetary incentives. And I know that this was presented at the RP conference. I myself wasn't able to attend this particular session, so I'm super excited to hear it, and I imagine you are all as well, because that's why you're here. So I'm popping a little bit of information about the session into the chat, and I will hand it over to Vinh Nguyen to go ahead and introduce himself and his team, and go ahead on into the presentation.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Very happy to be able to spend some time with you all here today to present on a project that we felt like was a successful project at our college. And I'm here to co-present with my co-presenters. Vinh Nguyen. Loris, do you want to say hello?
Hi, I'm Loris Fajoli. I'm the director of the research department.
Kevin Su, research and planning analyst from IVC as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm Amanda Romero. I'm the career education counselor and career center coordinator at IVC.
And with that, Loris, I'm going to hand over the presentation to you to get started. And I guess a little bit of housekeeping items. Feel free to drop in questions in the chat throughout, and if we could answer it in the chat, we will. But we'll definitely try to make sure that at the end there's at least 10 minutes of Q&A. So we'll keep our time on that as well. Thank you.
All right, so this is a really exciting project. I'm very excited when we started thinking about this. I got excited when we got the green light to implement it. And then as the results were coming in, and obviously now the cherry on top, getting the award and getting the recognition, this was truly an achievement from an entire team. It is also an accumulation of several years of work. We built very good relationships on campus. We have trust from the executive leadership down to practitioners that they see the value, and we have very good relationships. So the political capital that we were able to build up over the years truly came to fruition in this. And without that, I don't think we would have been able to pull this off in such a short amount of time. And so I think the next slide shows there was quite a few people that were involved. The executive leadership gave the green light, gave the funding associated with it, with the HER funding, that there were some dollars associated with it. The Career Center, Amanda is here. Without them, it would not have been possible. They audited a lot of it, and they actually had the student contacts, right? So they had the happy and the upset student in their room. So so they did a tremendous job. Student services, marketing, IT, bursar's office, there's a lot of people involved in order for this to work. But I think this is a very, very cool thing, a cool project, because it's a randomized trial. We see that very, very rarely in education. And as many of you know, the researchers in the room, it is difficult to see, is a project working because of the treatment, or is it because of the students that select it? Because this is a randomized trial, we can ease some of the concerns that this would not be applicable at your college, right? So because this is randomized, we have stronger confidence that this can be replicated in other areas as well. So at the RP conference, we had kind of a live polling to kind of set the stage of last year. Why did we start with this project? So most people said their enrollments are down compared to pre-pandemic levels. I don't think that's a surprise to anyway. So for IVC as well, we are down. So the context from last year is, and I think you will soon see a slide with a graph of our enrollment declines. So you see these are significant enrollment declines that we've had in terms of headcounts, FTS, any way you slice it, we were down. So I think a lot of us are worried about this. This is the statewide view. Oh, sorry, this is the Orange County view. So it's not just us, it's the entire area. And I think the state too is down overall in terms of enrollment. So this is number one. We're all dealing with declining enrollment. You know, strategic enrollment management is a buzzword again. So what can we do related to that? Second one, budget, right? So because of Hold Harmless is going away. So quite a few colleges will potentially see a shortfall in their budget because of funding that might be reduced based on Hold Harmless. Third thing, well, this is again related to enrollment. Can this decline be sustained, right? The question probably no, right? So there is going to be a critical point where you will have to rethink certain things, how you're doing things. So this enrollment is not necessarily sustainable if it continues like this. So why is that, right? So obviously we have one part is just declining enrollments in our K-12, right? So smaller high school graduating classes. There is probably very little we can do about that in terms of, you know, incentivizing more children in schools. That is, or more people coming into our area, moving into our area. That is probably not something we are in power of. So if you are a student, what will convince you to stay or return to college, right? So we have quite a few students who've stopped out since the pre-pandemic levels. And we also have a lot of adult, either former students or students who have not been in higher education. So why would they come? Because, next few slides show you, unemployment is super low. So as we know, higher education enrollment, especially community colleges, anti-cyclical to unemployment rate. So if you have high unemployment rates, people go back to education to kind of upskill. But if you have low unemployment rate, people usually don't see necessarily a value in going to higher education. So right now we have one of the lowest unemployment rates in the past, 20 years. These were some signs and some articles from last year as we were planning this project. Target is raising the minimum wage to $24 an hour. So if you can go minimum wage $24, everywhere is help wanted, you are in demand. So if you have a family, if you have certain financial concerns, why would you go and forfeit a $24 job and go to college? So these are macroeconomic forces that we have to be realistic about, that our students are making these decisions if they decide to come to college, either return to college or start college. There is another thing that many of you have seen. 6.4 million Californians have taken courses in college but have no credential or degree. There is another article I've seen a few weeks ago as well. How many people are have very close or maybe potentially even completed a degree but don't have a degree. And so this is a little bit the stage of, as we have started to think about, so we have declining enrollment, we have macroeconomic forces that do not incentivize necessarily enrollment and maybe reducing your income. And we also know many students have accumulated a lot of units. So that's the stage setting, and enter Vin with some great ideas.
Great, Loris. Thank you. Before I jump to the next slide, I do want to delve on this concept for a second. So here, 6.4 million Californians out there that have taken college courses but have no credential to show for. So when you think about, a job applicant, you have some college courses, you start to apply for jobs. You can't really show for anything in the education pieces. You have no credentials to show for. So this is our thought process. This is why we started thinking about this particular group of students. And when we start to think about enrollment, again, just to start with enrollment, and we start to think about enrollment management, like what have we done as an institution, or what have we learned from others that have tried some of this out there? If you've taken some of the strategic enrollment management classes out there, a lot of times they cover metrics, FTES, fill rates, productivity. And then in terms of, boosting enrollment, you can add sections, right? You can just add a bunch of sections, but if you don't, don't cancel your low enrolled courses. You're chasing a lot of enrollment, but at a very high cost, and that's probably not sustainable. You could do things such as adding sections to your schedule when you see there's a lot of demand for a particular course. Let's add additional sections as they fill up. Let's add additional late start sections to capture those enrollment as well. So these are some of like the traditional levers, at least from the Office of Instruction side. And then what about on the services side? So a lot of times when we think about enrollment management, we think about outreach. So a lot of focus during the onboarding phase. How do we get applicants to enroll in the courses, completing their onboarding steps? For those that are already enrolled, monitoring to see if they enroll in the upcoming semester, so that we want to improve that persistence rate. So a lot of email campaigns, we even tried calling campaigns, but unfortunately 80% of the time students don't even pick up the phone to receive your message. Tried campaigns such as, hey, for among those enrolled, let's get them to take one additional course, right? So if you're taking 2 classes, take 3. If you're taking 3, take 1 more, because those that are already here are probably more likely to take a class if we ask them to. We've even tried analyzing students' ed plan, pairing that up with their enrollments to help guide students take that additional class that's part of their ed plan. We've tried a lot of these things, and unfortunately, a lot of times the overall impact to enrollment is relatively flat, because when students decide to not enroll, there's usually a reason. Loris had alluded to a few earlier. So when we started to brainstorm what can we do given all these macroeconomic forces, we felt like there was a particular blind spot in the student journey, and that is, for students that have made sufficient academic progress but did not complete, can we get them across the finish line? So the light bulb moment was, can we focus on these students that if we can get them to take a few additional courses, it would mean that it translates into enrollment, and it will also translate into completion, because ultimately at the end of the day, our goal is to help students achieve their educational goal. So how do we get them across that finish line? And here I just want to show a brief summary of the student-centered funding formula. These numbers are probably wrong given that it was from last year. So, our colleges are funded on a few different things: the traditional FTES, or butts in seats component, the success components, that is, do they complete their transfer level math and English courses in the first year? Do they earn a certificate or degrees? So all of these components allow us to be funded by the state. And if you think about the idea that I just mentioned earlier, students close to completion, if you can get them to take that few courses, you'll get the FTES and you'll get that certificate or degree, which boosts the revenue that your college would receive. Here, just want to show, it's showing we did ask at the conference, what is your definition of the student close to completing? People had mentioned 45 plus units plus transfer level math and English, 2 or 3 courses away, etc. So for us, I just want to come up with one definition for us. A student is close to completing a certificate if they are 2 courses away. They are 4 courses if they are close to completion for a degree if they are 4 courses away. And we only chose 2 different numbers here because degrees usually requires at least 60 units. So we felt that we just expanded that requirement a little bit. So just want to ask you all, in case you all haven't looked at a transcript recently, this is kind of a screenshot of a student's transcript. And what it tells us is a list of courses that a student enrolled in for each semester. It shows the number of units associated with the courses and the letter grades. And then for each semester, it shows you your semester GPA and your cumulative GPA. And if someone were to hand you a transcript like this, and we ask, is this student close to completion? How would you go about doing that? And if I were to guess, a lot of things that are going through your mind is that, oh, that depends. It depends on what is your program of study, right? Because you would have to compare, if this student is studying accounting, you would have to compare it with the college catalog to see what the accounting requirements are. And you would go one by one to kind of check to see if the requirements have been fulfilled. Our thought is that, look, a lot of times students might know if they are close to completing or not. So this is where an Office of Research, who has access to a lot of data on campus, could help. Can we leverage data and technology to help remove some of these barriers for students? And the secret sauce is this. For the entire student body, all the students that are currently enrolled in your institution, let's compare them. First of all, let's identify one program at your institution, and let's compare the student transcript to the certificate or degree requirements. And that includes your major courses, the different general ed patterns that you have. And you can audit or evaluate the student's transcript to see how close they are. And for each student, you can do it for one program at a time. And then for us, we have 150 programs at our institution, so do it for all 150. So if you think about, for our institution, we have 12,000 students multiplied by 150 programs. That the secret sauce is effectively leveraging data. So for us to do this process using data and technology. And we'll go over some of the details in a second. But effectively, by doing that, we can determine the number and actual list of courses that a student is missing for each program. When we had this idea and we were pitching it to our college leadership, we had to quantify the opportunity size. Is this a lot of students, or is this just a few students? So for us, when we started to analyze our student population, we focused on two distinct populations. So again, this was last summer. We deemed students that were enrolled last spring as our current students. That is, they are currently enrolled. And then we also focus on students that were previously enrolled all the way back to fall 2020, which is around the time of the pandemic, that are no longer enrolled this spring. So these are what we call our non-current or the stopped out students. Because during the course of the pandemic, something happened and they are no longer enrolled at our institution as of this past spring. So if you look at that, there's 12,000 students that have stopped out, 10,000 students that are currently enrolled. Here, first question is, where are these students? And using clearinghouse data, using our awards, conferral data, we were able to parse out where they've gone for some of them. Some have transferred, some have earned an associate degree, some are at a different community college. So for us, we were able to parse those students out. If you've already transferred or earned an associate degree, we don't expect you to be back here at our institution, so we can take you out of our focus. However, there's still a good amount of students, 7,000, that have stopped out. And if you think about the stopped out students, start to reflect, who are the students that have stopped out, and put on your student equity plan or your equity lens here. Students that stop out are students that generally are disproportionately impacted on the success outcomes that we have in our plan. So for us, a lot of these students are our Hispanic students and our first-gen students at our institution. However, if we zoom in on these stopped out and the current students, can we identify who's close to completion? So we apply that secret sauce that I mentioned earlier, and we're able to quantify that of our current enrolled students, 5,000 of them are actually pretty close to completion. And for our stopped out students, a good 2,000 students are close to completion. So if we were to spend our effort on this, 7,000 or so students, we might be able to translate, we might be able to get some of these students to take additional courses that will help them complete, so that it would help boost both enrollment and completion. The problem is this: I had mentioned to you earlier that, in the past, we've sent students, we've done calling campaigns, and it's really, really difficult for students to take action. there's always a reason why a student, is not at your institution. So I'm going to try to illustrate an idea with you all. So Kevin and I are going to deconstruct what is in a personalized message. So I'm going to show you a series of emails, and I just want you to, given that we're in a Zoom format, just imagine yourself reading an email from your college and just think to yourself, will you take the action that's being asked of you? All right. And Kevin here is my co-presenter. He's a fabulous teammate. He's relatively young compared to me and Loris, and he still has the fresh take on being a college student. So he's gonna, play a role and tell us his reaction when he sees some of these emails.
And very quickly, I know we're in a Zoom format, so please join me in just booing in the chat if you're not happy with the messages that Vin provides, because I'd like to see some booing and jeering.
When we send a personalized message to a student, this is an example, first attempt. Dear student, you are close to completing a degree or certificate. Please enroll this fall to complete your credential.
So I see
Kevin,
something like this. I'm marking spam. I'm not even reading it. In the trash it goes.
Yeah, looks like spam, or it's pretty generic. How about this, Kevin? Dear Kevin, you are close to completing.
Man, great, Vin. You learned how to mail merge. I'm going to give you a D-. Not looking at it either.
No, not looking at it. How about this? Here is the schedule of classes. I'm going to tell you where you should go. I want you to look at the schedule of classes.
So if I were to even bother clicking on the schedule of classes, I'd be overwhelmed and not do anything. Sorry, not doing it.
Yeah, because when you click on the schedule, it's pretty, daunting, right? For us, I think we have like a couple of thousand courses, so it's which one do you enroll in? So you may have questions. So how about this, Kevin? If you have any questions, I'm going to send you to the counseling office.
I don't even know where the counseling office is. Like, are they online? Are they in person? Like, what building am I supposed to go to? Who do I contact?
You can call this number or email this email address.
What am I supposed to ask, though? I'm still kind of confused.
How about if you have any specific questions, I'm going to direct you to a specific counselor. Her name is Amanda. So a lot of times when we ask students or we send students to a place for help, it's usually a generic office. Here, I'm going to tell you, go to a specific person.
I'm sure Amanda is a beautiful person, but, I still don't know what I'm supposed to ask her, and I just don't think I'm going to take any action. Sorry, bud.
How about this, Kevin? I'm going to tell you that you are close to completing a certificate of achievement in computer information management. Please register.
I didn't know I was close to that. I'm a dance major. I was just taking some random classes. I didn't know I was close to it. But, if you're going to tell me I'm close to it, my boss has been telling me I'm close to a promotion for 3 years. Can't you tell me a little bit more about that?
You are 2 courses away.
What's the audience thinking? If Vin knows I'm 2 courses away, why not just tell me what classes I'm away from, right?
Sure, I'll tell you the class. It's actually CIM 150 and CIM 160.
Oh, well, I'm feeling a little bit better, but classes are expensive these days. Inflation's up. My dog food's like 4 times more. Anything you can offer me?
Yeah, how about we cover your tuition and fees, and you don't have to pay for books at all. And if you need money for food or gas, we'll give you some bookstore vouchers where you can get some gift cards.
Oh, now I'm feeling a little better here. I'm kind of on the fence about it. Let's see. If I come back though, I'm gonna have to cut some hours at work. Sorry, Loris. Is there anything you can give me in exchange for that? Like, anything extra?
All right. How about this? If you're able to take the classes that we're asking you to take, after you complete, we're going to grant you an additional scholarship to make up for the time that you're taking off work.
Like Wendy says, now we're talking. Now we're talking.
All right. Well, thank you, Kevin,
Thank you, everybody.
For
I love
sharing.
the engagement.
Yeah, thanks for illustrating, you know, some perhaps student views when or how students would interpret some of the messages that we just illustrated. And the point that we're trying to set out here is that when we send out a personalized message or a message that asks the students to take action, it's really important to provide them with the context and be very clear with what's being asked of them. And the point here is that how you implement really matters. The ideas that we're sharing here today, a lot of them are not novel. So the concept of focusing on near completers, I think every college has something set up already. So for example, at our institution, we have a transfer center with a great counselor, very passionate counselor, that every semester he generates a list of students that have completed 45 transferable units. He calls them, emails them, tries to get them to come in for him to help them complete their transfer application. So the definition of near completers is 45 units. Completion grants and scholarship. This one, again, is not brand new. It's a lot of institutions have already implemented these. The first one, I think, is the one from Georgia State, where if you complete at the very end, they'll give you a retention grant. That's what they call it, instead of a completion scholarship, an award amount to help get you to that finish line. So not novel ideas. However, we recently came upon a particular study, again, based on a randomized experiment across multiple universities, where they tested completion grant to see if it has an impact on student success or student completion. And their conclusion was actually completion grants are ineffective. So when I saw this, I thought it was very counterintuitive, because I was like, we just ran this last year and for us, it was like very successful. What is this? And there, when I read the paper, what I found was that the definition of a near completer was very generic. Again, they did something like a 45 unit type threshold. This person probably has one more year left at the 4-year institution. And moreover, the message was like not conducive in terms of trying to get the students to take action. It's just a message that says, dear, Kevin, you're close to completing. If you complete this year, you'll get this award amount. It didn't necessarily guide the students in terms of what classes take in order to complete. So here, again, the point that I'm trying to drive home here is that the details matter when you're implementing some of these initiatives, and precision is key, at least for our implementation. So to round things up for a second, this is what our personalized student message ultimately looked like. It said, "Dear Kevin, we have some exciting news for you." We told them the economic value of what a certificate or degree would be on their lifetime earning. We tell them specifically that they are 3 courses away from an American history and associate degree, and that if they were to enroll, we'll cover their tuition, their gas, their books, etc. And if they complete, they'll get a completion scholarship. And at the end of the letter, we actually outline or detail, gave the details of all the awards in which a student is close to completing. So a lot of time a student is placed inside a program of study, and we just track against their program of study. Here, a lot of students could qualify or could be close to completion for several degrees and certificates. For us, we wanted to remove the information barrier for the students. So we actually lay out all the key courses for every degree or certificate that a student is close to. We also sent them text messages letting them know that they are 1 or 2 courses away, giving them a personalized link with that previous letter. And again, sending them to Amanda for direct assistance if they have any particular questions. With that, I am going to pass it over to Kevin to give an overview of the intervention and some of the results that we've been seeing so far.
Thanks, Vin. So we'll start with the intervention first, talking about how we planned it out and our thought process mainly in deciding how the intervention worked out. I just want to reference this statewide college attendance survey from fall 22. When we look at it, the biggest reasons for a student hesitating on whether they want to attend college is number 1 or 2, they can't afford college at this time, or that they have to prioritize work. So given what Loris mentioned earlier with economic, unemployment being at its lowest, we're fighting tough competition. So we really have to incentivize students to come back by providing something in return. So if you want to jump to the next slide, Vin. So in our intervention, we really wanted to address 3 main barriers. 1, information. So what courses do they have to take? So let's let them know exactly what they need to do to complete that award. Number 2, let's cover their enrollment cost. So tuition, books, materials, and gas. Let's make it possible for them to come onto campus or have all the materials they need to take their classes. So what we did is we gave a $200 bookstore voucher per degree applicable transferable course, hoping that that would help and cover a lot of the costs. And then lastly, right, by coming onto campus or taking your courses, you are probably losing some hours at work. So we have to provide a little bit there as well. So what we did is we provided for one group of students, a $200 or $500, so $200 for a certificate, $500 for an award, or we provided for another group $500 or $1,000 for their award as well. So in our control group, we had no outreach versus our treatment groups had some combination of interventions of reaching out to them and giving different monetary awards. So very quickly, we're going to go over our intervention timeline. So essentially, we got approved for this in April, or I think April or May. So we had about 2 months to roll this out. Very quickly, for our stopped out students and our current students, we sent out the information. And for stopped out students, they got an offer as well in July. And then basically, we sent some reminders and then started the semesters in August. So in between that period, we try to get as many students as we could. And then just to repeat for our control group, we had about 450 in the stopped out, 1,300 that qualified, and then similarly a quarter that we kept out for control in the current student population with 3,600 in the treatment. And then, so let's kind of show me the money moment, right? Let's look at the outcomes. Did we succeed in enrollment? Did we succeed in getting them to enroll in a recommended course? And what is their completion after just 1 semester? So for stopped out students, if you'd like to focus on the left for any enrollment, if we did not contact you, about 9% of students came back on their own. But if we contacted the student with an offer, we got 13% of students. So when you look at that, that's a 40% increase in enrollment based on that alone. And then of those students that came back, how many enrolled in a recommended course? We didn't see as much there, and I have some inkling on that because GE courses are very broad, so you could accidentally take a recommended course even if you're going on your own path. But what I want to emphasize is that on whether they were on track to achieve an award, we had 2% for those who come back, and we had 6% for those who were in the treatment group. So that's a 245% increase in the number of students who are an achieving award after just 1 semester. So what we're finding is that the information plus incentives, it is really helping students get across that finish line if they're close to it. And then similarly for our current students, we see a little bit different behavior. They're already here. So the extra information isn't more likely to get them to enroll or take a recommended course. But similarly to our stopped out students, having that information is pretty useful. So we are seeing jumps in that for awards as well. And then very quickly, we'll look at equity implications. So for enrollment, what we're seeing is there's no particular student group that's being harmed by this intervention. I'd like to focus on Black or African American students. So if we didn't contact them, 0% came back, and we're seeing an 11% of the population that we contact come back. So we are seeing we are seeing some benefits for our DI groups as well. If you focus on Hispanic Latino, a lot of them come back on their own, but even by contacting them, we're seeing some growth there as well. And then just looking at one-term completion, like we saw, it's still very early on, but we see completion starting to happen in every single ethnicity group as well. So that is early evidence to show that we're very hopeful for. And then I'd like to pass it on. Amanda, would you like to talk about the student reactions and what you've been hearing?
Yeah, so it was very interesting. So as Kevin mentioned, we had a short time frame. So we didn't have a lot of time of when the email went out. And so we weren't sure of the demand, right? So we had like our summer kind of planned in terms of coverage and our offering of counseling appointments. So once that email went out, we did have a demand. So we needed to bring in a couple more counselors to help with the demand because students wanted appointments. And the last thing we wanted is not to be able to serve students after they just received this crucial information. So definitely that was something to kind of keep in mind. But the responses, I would say, so the email came from my email directly. So I received so many responses back, and some of them were students like kind of sharing their whole life story and saying like, thank you so much for sharing this because I never realized I was so close. Others saying that they never felt accomplished, and had they known they were this close, they would have done this a long time ago. And you'll see this email here. One student actually emailed and said, you know, the degree was preventing me from a promotion as a director of IT. And now knowing this information, it kind of changed their whole perspective. It's like, if they're that close and this was preventing them from an opportunity, you know, it kind of nudged them like to take part in it. So students were extremely grateful. They were extremely appreciative. And just, you know, like it was just them knowing, and they felt like someone took the time to nudge them and say, hey, you're so close, like, let's do this. And then of course we got the other emails from students that would say, you know, I'm no longer a student there, or, you know, no longer interested. Right. And so it was just like, take me off the list. But another interesting thing that we found is some students had completed. So when we looked at their transcript and their records, they had already achieved the degree or certificate. However, they took some of their courses at another community college, so it automatically didn't pick them up in our audit. And so they actually were complete and just never knew. So they had a degree kind of sitting out there waiting for them, or a certificate, and they had just never actually like manually applied for it or submitted the proper forms like with the counselor. So, you know, there was a lot that came out of this. And I will say overall, like in the themes that I kind of seen were students were just really, really grateful. And I thought, oh, the money's going to sell it. Like that is going to be the carrot that really pulls students in. But for some, it wasn't even about the money. It was just the fact that they were nudged of like, hey, you're close to completing. And it kind of created like the opportunity and that nudge of like, I got to do this. I'm so close. So yeah, so it was very interesting to see just the feedback. And I think as us as counselors, it was fun because, you know, it makes a difference for so many of our students. And so I will say that was very interesting.
Thanks, Amanda. So kind of to wrap this up and talk about the ultimate kind of counts of what happened. So to review, our ultimate goal was to boost enrollment and completion by removing information barriers, removing enrollment costs, and removing the opportunity costs. What did this get us? Well, we got it. So compared to if we did not do this intervention at all, we got 370 new enrollments as a result of the intervention, 108 new students, 33 FTES, which equates to about $165,000 in base funding. And for students who completed the award, we got 19 more certificates of proficiencies, 33 more certificates of achievement, 9 more associate degrees. And that's 57,000 more in student success funding than if we hadn't done this intervention. So we're seeing early gains in terms of, you know, the money when we're pitching this to our executives. We're seeing good results for that. And what are our takeaways? Well, what we found out is that information plus financial incentives work. We got a 40% increase in enrollment as a result of that. Not as much at increasing enrollments for current students because they're already here, but they're highly effective at increasing completions. Information alone isn't going to be enough, so we do need to provide some financial incentives. Our enrollment incentives really seemed efficient enough because we didn't see any extra large gains as a result of providing that scholarship from finishing. And then another thing is we found out that contacting students by email alone. So we kind of glossed over this, but we tried different formats of reaching out to students, whether it's by email, by sending them a mailer. But we found out that apparently they're checking their email. So that's sufficient versus spending more to try out creative ways of reaching out to the student.
Thanks, Kevin. Where do we go from here? At least for our institution, we have some ideas on where to go next. So for us, it was last summer, we kind of held those, we didn't expand our intervention to this semester because we wanted to track the students kind of like long-term trajectory in the upcoming year. So we made a strategic decision to not do anything additional this current semester to see if students continue to take classes that they were recommended in this past summer, to see how impactful the intervention is on actual student completions within 1 year. So we're tracking that. However, as we think about this upcoming year, few ideas in terms of expanding the program. So before, we focused on 2 and 4 courses because we felt students could enroll in those courses and complete within 1 semester. However, if we think from a case management perspective, we could expand, say, our degree offerings for the degrees to be 8 courses away from completion, so that we could get the students to take the right courses in the fall and the spring, so that they could achieve their award by the end of 1 academic year. Here, the second bullet, I said, making the case to the state's chancellor's office for making student enrollment and grades available to all colleges. And the intent here is that what you saw, the numbers earlier, was just based on course enrollment or the transcript that we have at our own district. And you see that, we've increased completions by a certain amount. However, we know a lot of our students take courses at other community colleges. They swirl through our system. Within Orange County, I believe there's at least 8 community colleges. So if I could just get our hands on what they've completed at other institution for me to, substitute some of those courses for our courses, a lot more would be close to completion. And for the record, when we presented this at the RP conference last month, Executive Vice Chancellor John Hetz was in the room as well, so he did hear it. And he also mentioned in the room that if any other college is interested in pursuing something like this and they're going to embark on it, do get in touch with him or the chancellor's office as well, because they're trying to track the interest in this to see if we could do something statewide. So at the conference, we also went over some high-level logic to identify near completers in case any college wants to replicate it. But I think in the interest of time for today, unless folks really want me to go over some of the technical details, I would prefer to just jump to the question and answer portion of the webinar, so that we could address some of the questions that have been shared. I'll stop sharing for a second, then I'll show the last slide of the presentation, which shows our contact information and some hyperlinks to some support material in case anybody wants to read up on some of the details. So let me just jump to the end of the presentation. Happy to take questions at this time if anybody has any. Loris, is there any in the...
Hi, Vin. There's actually a few, I think a few people who would love to hear some technical details.
So the 2 links here that you see, both the presentation and the supporting materials, the technical details, it obviously, if you think about it, obviously is involved. All the code that we've used is in the supporting materials, so it can be replicated. You can also go over the slides that show the high level kind of strategic elements that you have that can be reviewed in the presentation slide. But we are very, very happy if anybody wants to truly implement this. As we said, the details matter. And I think quickly jumping over it for the next 2 minutes might not do it justice. So we would very, very happy if anybody truly is interested in doing that, to set up a separate call and kind of going through this in a little bit more detail. But we are very transparent presentation with those slides and the supporting materials with all the code and all the sample Excel sheets that you need, how to code the degrees and the certificates, and how a computer can consume that information is all in these 2 links here.
Yeah, so the technical details are here, but I do see some in the chat that they do want to see it. So what I want to see if this is okay. We could do 10 minutes of Q&A just overall first. I'm happy to stay back for an additional 10 minutes to kind of review a few slides that it's a little bit more technical. But if Brad, if that's okay, I'm not sure if you're sticking around, but I at least am willing to stay around for another 10 minutes afterwards. But I don't want to go over the technical detail and not have a Q&A for the rest of the audience. So if that's okay.
Great idea.
Yep, sounds great.
So if my co-presenters could help me comb through some of the questions.
Did we check if the courses were available, or if did we check if students attempted to register?
No, we did not check if the courses were available. Ideally, we would like to do that. Earlier, Kevin mentioned that we started this in like April or May, but actually we didn't get the green light until like June, the middle of June, and we had to roll it out in July. So ideally, I would like to pair it with what we are currently offering, just so that we could call out the courses that are specifically offered this semester. But we weren't able to incorporate that within that 2-3 week timeline when we got the green light. So no, we did not, and did not check for attempts to register as well. Here we focus on a few key outcomes that we felt were, were super relevant. One is enrollment, whether or not you enroll, yes or no. Did you take up on any of the courses that we listed? And do we anticipate you to complete? So we felt like from a, treatment versus control, those are some key outcomes that we wanted to track. Obviously, we could also look at the attempt to register, but we haven't done that yet. Someone asked about course catalog. That's something that comes up when we had our cross-functional implementation team. That was a concern as well. For us, one of the key themes for us is always simplify. So we just went with the latest version of the catalog because all students are eligible for the current catalog. So that's the only one that we checked.
There's also a question on, how many degree options could be available for a student when you use an 8 course path. Is there some additional parameter around, assuming this the certificate?
Yeah, if once we expand it to 8 courses, I think that the number of degrees and certificates that a student is close to completing would increase. And again, we just want to remove that information barrier and list it out all for them. If it happens to be 10 degrees and certificate, we'll just list out all 10. And again, we're not trying to steer them away of their particular educational goal. We just want to list out this information, and they see a certificate or a degree that said, hey, I didn't know I was close to this one, and they're interested in completing it. They could pursue it on their own, or they could schedule some time with Amanda and they could explore, various options. And feel free to unmute or raise your hand to ask questions as well. We're trying our best to comb through the chat at the moment, and I apologize if we missed any of them on accident.
And Amber asked, how do we address the changes in program if a student changes their program of study?
Here at our college, Program of study is identified via our student educational plan. We did not touch that at all. The point here is that students deviate from their plan or change their majors all the time. We didn't want to restrict a student to one particular program. So for every student, we compared it with all 150 programs that we have and just provide that information to the student. So we don't restrict ourselves to the program of study. Did you use our college email or personal email address? For us, I believe we did current, or I forget which one exactly. It's for us, it doesn't matter too much because the default in our system is that the college email forwards to their personal email unless they choose to opt out of that. So for us, that wasn't a big deal, but I think you should probably want to do a personal email, especially for stopped out students.
Then I was just going to chime in, going back to like in terms of the program of study. So we did find that some of the students, like, so the letter they received indicated a degree, and then maybe at some point they changed their major. So in some cases, students found that they were close to like multiple degrees or certificates. And so the student didn't realize, like, maybe once they changed their mind at some point that they were so close to the last one, right? And the GE applied to both degrees. And so in some cases, it actually worked out for the students because they realized they were eligible for more than they had even thought.
I got a question related to, I think it's a personal question related to R, if this is specific to R, if this could be done in other packages. I think it's all set up in R in our instance, but it definitely could be translated into other packages as well. Might take a little bit more work depending on the functionality of interacting with a SQL Server database and reading the SQL code and kind of modifying it for every student, every degree, as Vin will show in the next few slides. But yes, anybody who's proficient in coding can use the ideas that are presented in the R code and translate it into Python, Stata, and other tools.
I think there's a question on notable trends for the credentials students completed. We're still doing early analysis on it, but it looks like entrepreneurship for certificates is a big one. And then other than that, accounting is one that students seem to steer towards. So very practical certificates and degrees seems to be what those that complete early are gravitating towards.
There's a question on platform for text messaging. I think for us, it was like Ocelot. And if we tracked analytics and such. So yeah, we did. For us, in terms of outcomes, we try to steer away from analytics involving just like engagement with the text message or the letter. I mean, obviously we have that, people click on them, but for us, ultimately, we always evaluate our campaign against the goal of the campaign, and that is enrollment and completion. So that's a higher level, order of, effectiveness. So, if you open your text or if you engage in that way, like, sure, that's effective, that, in terms of a modality, but what we care about is the actual outcomes. All right, I'm not seeing any further questions. So, and we're right about time. So what I'm going to do is, for those that are interested in the technical aspect, I'm going to spend 10 minutes on the high level technical details to go through. Again, most colleges are going to have different systems, so we try to illustrate it with some very high level concepts for you all to study. And if you needed to replicate that at your own institution, you could. We try to steer away from our own infrastructure because every college is going to look differently. So I believe Loris, folks are asking for the bit.ly links, and Loris did already paste the links already. So, and now I'm going to, for those interested, please stick around and we will share the technical details. All right, high level logic. Just want to illustrate a few key ideas. So in order to identify students that are close to completing a degree or certificate, let's deconstruct what a degree and certificate looks like. For both, there are going to be a set of courses that are required, which I call the major courses. What's different about an associate degree from a certificate is that there is a general education component. In general education, we speak very freely, but it's actually a little bit more complicated at a community college because you could have a local general ed pattern for your AA, a local general ed pattern for your AS. You can have your CSU GE or the IGETC GE. Thankfully, in the next few years, there might be a CalGETC. So instead of being 4 boxes here, there would just be 3 boxes. So to illustrate, I'm just going to focus on the associate degree for a second because the logic for an associate degree would translate or would be available for a certificate as well. So how do we determine how many courses away is a student? So I'm going to focus on the major courses for a second. For this particular box, let's look in our college catalog and determine how many courses are required. Here, you need to record that information. We call it N_requirement. And then let's look at the student's transcript and determine of this list of courses, how many did they complete, required versus completed. If you take the difference between the two, that is the gap. So we'll have the gap in terms of the missing courses for the major courses. And for an associate degree, you would want to do this again for the local GE requirements, the CSU GE requirement, and the IGETC requirement. So for each of those boxes, you have to determine the gap that's within each of the boxes. And then for the, to determine how many courses you are away from an associate degree, you would have to sum up the gap for the major, and you would take the minimum gap across all the GE pattern. So for us at our institution, you can earn an associate degree and you could adhere to any of the associate degree general ed pattern. So for us, we're going to choose the one that has the smallest gap. That's high level. So let's go into the details a little bit more. How do you determine the gap for major courses or for each general ed? So to dig a little further, let's just decompose. I'm going to go with IGETC since it satisfies requirements for both the college and CSU and UCs. So for IGETC requirements, if you haven't taken a look at the requirements in a while, it effectively is broken up into different categories from English composition all the way to the lab. So we're going to repeat the same logic or idea that we saw earlier. So for each of these categories, let's determine the gap for category 1A, which is English composition. So the gap would be taking the difference between number of required courses with the completed. English composition, there's only one required course, so it's going to be 1 or 0. Repeat this for every single one of these categories up until 5C. And once you have the gap for every single one of the categories, you can sum up category 1A to category 5C, and that would give you the total gap for the IGETC GE pattern. So this gives you the total number of courses needed for IGETC, and then for the associate degree, you would do it again for the other GE patterns and for the major courses. That's the high level logic. Let's just show you the data that's needed. So data sources, you just need a list of students that you're interested in, whether that be your current students or your stopped out students or some students that fit certain criteria. Pair that with all the course completions, which you could get via MIS or the transcript. You would also need a list of awards that you offer at your institution. And for each award, you need a list of all the courses that fulfill the major requirements. And you would also need a list of all the courses that meet all the GE requirements. So for these, major and GE patterns, you would have to break things out at the category level such that you have the list of courses and the number of courses required. So those are kind of like the 3 or 4 key data sources. And depending on the district or the college that you work at, some of them might be accessible to you via your data warehouse. Some of them needs to be gathered. So let me just illustrate with our institution. The list of awards and major courses, unfortunately for us, is not available to us in an easily consumable format. So what we did was we just created a spreadsheet where we have for every single row, every row is a degree or certificate. And for, you'll see the type COA, COPs, and associate degrees. And what we transcribe from our course catalog or our college catalog is we broke courses into different groups. So course list 01 are all the courses that meet a particular requirement for that major. And in the next column, N course 01 just tells me of this list of courses that are listed here, how many courses does the student need to complete. So we're breaking up the majors into different groups of courses and then writing out the courses that's required and the number of courses that's needed. And we repeat this depending on how complex that degree or certificate is. So we had to transcribe this information. What about GE requirements? Thankfully, for us, we recently found some tables inside our student information system that contain this information. And most likely your system would have it too. And the reason why I say that is because a lot of the scheduled classes that are being shown to students now, most systems have a feature in place where you can identify courses that meet certain IGETC, CSU GE, or your local GE pattern requirements. So for us, we actually used to transcribe this information from the college catalog as well. But when I saw our schedule of classes, I was like, oh, this information is available somewhere. So I was able to pinpoint it and then ask our IT to provide this data set for us to consume. So here is just a list of courses that you see that meets different IGETC code IGETC requirement that's listed here. For the number of courses that's needed in each category, I just transcribed this into a very wide spreadsheet that tells us the number of required courses for each one of those categories. 1A, we need 1 class. 1B, we need 1 class. 2A, we need 1 class. And the intent of putting all this into a spreadsheet is so that when we go about coding this up, I can reference these values. And if they change in the future, we just have to modify the spreadsheet and not have to modify the code. In terms of the calculations, some key concepts or some key steps is counting up the number of completed courses. So for us, we have access to our data warehouse. I'm giving you some sample code that says count the number of distinct courses that the student has completed. So here it's number of classes that meet the 1A requirement. Same thing for the gap. It's just comparing with the number of required courses and returning the number of gaps that's available. And then you sum this up. With that, I believe that's the last slide. So I'm going to stop sharing and answer any questions.
So you see essentially the code. So I think many of you and me included initially we stopped doing this because we did not have the information. What we realized is you have that information in the catalog. So all of you have that information, and Vin showed how you can transcribe the information from the catalog into a consumable data format. After that, you just have to essentially create a base SQL code that then gets updated for every single student or every single degree or certificate. And so the computer is good doing something a million times. You just have to show them one and then the iterations that they have to consume it. And so this is in many ways essentially a degree audit system, a self-created degree audit system that we had vetted by many counselors, vetted it for us. So we gave them samples and realized how accurate this is. If you do have a degree audit system already, many of you have it, that have it at that level that they can show you what is missing, not only if it's meeting the requirement, because some degree audit systems only say met the requirement or no, has key elements missing. Also, some only have it for a specific student and a specific degree. They don't check all students against all degrees. So that's essentially what Vince showed you. It's any sample that you want to throw at it against any degree and spits out the missing pieces. All right, I don't see any more questions here. Anybody can unmute themselves. If you have any additional questions, as we mentioned, let me post the links again. Here are the links if you want to study the code and the examples, and please reach out to us if you would like to delve a little bit deeper about the details and as you expand and think through it for your institutions.